So you've decided to pick up the Pokémon TCG. You've already seen my how to play and deck building guides, but what cards are supposed to support your Pokémon and which of them are legal to play? Well, different decks have different needs, but some cards are near universal, or staples. That's what I'll be covering in this video, so no matter what deck you build, you'll have a solid base to work from. There will be a few Pokémon that I mention, but for the most part, I'll be focusing on trainer cards for now. With that being said, there are 3 different categories I'll be putting these cards into to hopefully make your decision-making process a more streamlined one. We have evergreen cards, or cards that never rotate out of the standard format because they are consistently reprinted every few sets. We have expansion staples, which are cards that come out at or near the beginning of each expansion and will see play for most, if not all, the 3 to 4 years that they're in the standard rotation. Finally, we have conditional staples that don't go in every deck, but are almost always featured in decks that they do work in. I'll clarify this more when we get to it. Once I've covered all 3 of these categories, I'll also list these cards based on what they're used for. So then, let's begin. The Evergreen list includes the following cards: Professor's Research, Boss's Orders, Judge, Ultra Ball, Switch, Escape Rope, Rare Candy, and Energy Retrieval. Professor's Research gives you some of the best card draw that can go in virtually any deck. By discarding your hand, you will be able to draw 7 new cards from the top of your deck. While this carries a heavy price in some decks, it is also possible to use this card when you have no other cards in your hand, giving you a fresh start. Make sure to get a high 5 if that ever happens. Boss's Orders allows you to choose a Pokémon from your opponent's bench and bring it to their active spot. You can do this to slow down your opponent by bringing up something they'll have to switch out, dragging out a Pokémon they retreated to the bench to prevent a knockout, or to target one of their low health support pieces in the back to knock it out and take the final prize cards you need to win the game. Most games I play are won or lost by the use of Boss's Orders on the final turn. Judge lets you shuffle your hand into your deck to draw 4 new cards while forcing your opponent to do the same. It's a good alternative to Professor's Research by not having to discard the cards you have, but can also disrupt your opponent. It might help them too, but you'll have to use your own judgment when playing it. Ultra Ball is your consistent Pokémon search item. By discarding 2 cards from your hand, you may search your deck for any Pokémon. While it's usually used to find evolution forms, it can also be used for basic Pokémon as well. As a note, Pokeball and Great Ball are also evergreen cards that get Pokemon out of your deck, but they're much less efficient than Ultra Ball and whatever other ball gets printed each expansion, which is why they're not officially being listed here. Switch is used to swap your active Pokemon with one on the bench. This foregoes the requirement to discard energy to pay the retreat cost, making it very handy. It also doesn't count as a retreat, so you can still pay the usual retreat cost for Pokemon you just brought up as well, if your strategy calls for it. Escape Rope is a more disruptive version of Switch. Instead of just your active Pokemon being swapped to the bench, your opponent must also do the same thing. To make things better, your opponent must make their decision first, so you can then decide which of your own Pokemon will be best to handle it. Think of it as U-turn or Volt Switch in the Pokemon VCG, only it forces your opponent to switch as well. Rare Candy is a card that is used to take a basic Pokemon and evolve it to its Stage 2 form, skipping Stage 1. The rules for evolution are still the same otherwise. Not every deck needs this, but it's consistently reprinted and it won't hurt to have 4 in a box, just in case. Energy Retrieval, as the name implies, retrieves 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile and puts them straight into your hand. Great for recursion, or if you're using a deck that discards a lot of energies to attack. The expansion staples include the cards Bibarel with the Industrious Incisors ability, Manaphy with the Wave Veil ability, Jirachi with the Stellar Veil ability, Radiant Greninja, Iono, Nest Ball, Super Rod, Artisan, Path to the Peak, Battle VIP Pass, and Level Ball. Bibarel's Industrious Incisors ability lets you draw cards until you have 5 in your hand. It does take up at least 2 card slots in your deck for itself and the Bidoof it evolves from, but the utility is well worth it. And if you have room, it also pairs very well with the Squovit with the Nest Stash ability, which shuffles your hand and places it at the bottom of your deck, then you draw 1 card from the top. This means that Bibarel can draw you a minimum of 4 cards each turn without even using a supporter. Manaphy's Water Veil ability protects your bench Pokemon from your opponent's attacks. This is a must-have in any deck that has low health support Pokemon or relies on evolving basic Pokemon to get your strategy going. It's nice to have in general because several Pokemon these days have attacks that can target your bench, but it's especially handy if your deck has a slower start. Jirachi's Stellar Veil ability is similar to Manaphy, but it protects your bench Pokemon from damage counters. If you are confused about the difference, each Pokemon's attacks that affect your bench will use the terms deals damage or place damage counters on. This card could arguably go into the next category because far fewer Pokemon use this kind of attack, but it's still handy to have at least one on hand. Radiant Greninja has the Concealed Cards ability, which allows you to discard a basic energy card from your hand in order to draw 2 new cards from the top of your deck. Even decks that can't use Radiant Greninja's attack often include it because the draw power is just that good. Several decks also interact with energies in the discard pile, so it synergizes very well with those too. Iono is similar to Judge, but each player shuffles their hand and places it on the bottom of their decks, then draws cards equal to their remaining prize cards. This is great for disrupting your opponent if you're behind, but it can also be used as a good way to refresh your hand at the start of a game if you need it. Just be sure that you have other means of card draw if you use it while you're the one in the lead. Nest Ball lets you search your deck for any kind of basic Pokemon and put it straight onto your bench. Note that by using this, the chosen Pokemon never actually goes to your hand, so any effects or abilities that activate when a Pokemon is placed from your hand to the bench will not happen. Super Rod allows you to choose up to 3 of any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile and put them back into your deck. This way, even if your Pokemon get knocked out or you run out of energy, you have a way to keep your strategy moving. Artisan is a stadium card that allows either player to search their decks for a basic non-rule box Pokemon and put it onto their bench once per turn. Path to the Peak is another stadium card that removes all abilities from rule box Pokemon while it's on the field. This includes your own, so if your strategy revolves around those kinds of abilities, you can skip this one. If not, it's a great way to potentially throw off your opponent. Battle VIP Pass is on the way out of rotation this year, but it's just too good to leave it off this list. It can only be used on your first turn, even if you go second, but lets you search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them straight onto your bench. Even with how situational it is though, many decks rely on this to give them the strong start needed to set up their strategies as early as possible. Level Ball is another card that will rotate out this year, but it is still very effective. It searches your deck for a Pokemon with 90 health or less, which may sound underwhelming, but some Stage 1 support Pokemon meet this criteria, allowing you to search for them as well. The situational staple cards I've included are Colress's Experiment, Irida, Arven, and Superior Energy Retrieval. Colress's Experiment is arguably the best card draw from any supporter in the game right now. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 3 of your choice into your hand, and the other 2 into the Lost Zone. The Lost Zone is essentially the banished or exiled zone and can't be interacted with at all. While this is a must-have for any deck that unlocks abilities based on how many cards are in the Lost Zone, not everyone is comfortable with permanently losing 2 cards, which is why it's not as widely used as other supporters. That being said, it's the only supporter that lets you get 5 cards deep into your deck without first getting rid of the cards in your hand. Irida searches your deck for a water Pokemon and an item. This is a rather niche card because it usually only benefits water decks, but if you're building one, it is perfect. Irida's primary use is to find a Stage 2 water Pokemon and a rare candy so you can evolve your basic Pokemon as soon as possible. But it can also search out balls, battle VIP passes, and recursion pieces. Arven lets you search your deck for a tool card and an item card. These 2 types were split into different categories at the start of the Scarlet and Violet expansion, which is what allows Arven to shine. It isn't as widely used as other supporters, but if you want easy access to your tools and items, Arven is your main man. And last but not least is Superior Energy Retrieval. By discarding 2 cards from your hand, you can bring back 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your hand. This is more of an honorable mention because only a few decks like Chien-Pao EX and Goldango EX use that much energy for their attacks. However, if you're building those decks, this card is indispensable. Now, all of the cards I've listed here are good to have on hand just in case, even if you don't use them in your first deck. And assuming you're not a deck building addict like me, just buying 4 of each of these will have you set for a very long time. A few cards like Jirachi, Manaphy, and Skwovet will be fine just having 1 each. Evergreen cards and the cards with the F or G markers will be around for at least the next 2 to 3 years as of this video's making in early 2024. You can get all of these online for under $50 before shipping and tax, though your local game store should have most, if not all of these in their bulk bins. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, and it's not necessary to get every single card on the list, but hopefully this guide has helped you figure out where you'd like to start. As promised, here's a list of these cards grouped up based on their use. for card draw, for search, for disruption, and for recursion. I hope this video has been a helpful resource on your journey to getting into the Pokemon TCG. Feel free to ask any questions about any cards that you're curious about for your decks. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. And if the standard format isn't your cup of tea, then hang tight, because I'll be working on a video covering the casual-friendly Gym Leader Challenge format soon. But until then, thanks for watching, God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one.